Hi, folks. This is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report. You know, over the past 20, 30, I don't know, time goes so fast, but over the past couple decades, soft plastics have sort of taken over a big part of our fishing. And it started years ago with the advent of the Mr. Twister. It was a soft plastic bait with a little thin, wiggly tail that looked like something in the water. Before that, we didn't have these kind of baits. But remember that there's different kinds of plastics, different densities, different natures of the plastic. And so different plastic lures work differently. But I want you to be aware of something that it's just dawned on me this year, and it's a huge thing. Last year, I started putting different conglomerations of baits together. In other words, in the fall, like right now, one of the really good baits for largemouth bass are these creature baits, which is a jig head with a living rubber. We call it living rubber, but it's a plastic skirt on it that easily pulsates in the water. And then at the end of that jig, at the end of the hook, you put on a soft plastic tail of some kind, whether it be a paddle tail or it could be, and more for largemouth right now, is some kind of a creature bait. They have baits they call a beaver. They have other baits that look like a crayfish, look like a lizard, something on the end of that. And you fish it very slowly now that the water's getting colder. So I put a bunch of these baits together last year, and it was fun creating my own concoctions and going out and catching fish on them. And I stored them all in the tackle box. And then this year, when I go back to those baits, guess what I've discovered? Number one, I don't care what plastics you use, when you keep them together, the plastic itself is going to eat on each other. It's going to cause a distortion, a change in the shape, or it's going to cause them to melt, to form. Oh, it has a terrible effect. But here's the other effect that I noticed. The living rubber, and that's what we called it, the plastic skirts that were on each of these lures, the plastic soft baits tended to make the skirts crumble, all come apart. And so all those lures now are ruined unless I was able to go out and get more plastic skirts to put on them. But what I'm trying to tell you is that these soft plastic baits, and I want you to be aware of another thing. Any baits coming from California, or California has made it a point to put a sign on every bait or every type of fishing tackle that you use with plastic that says can cause cancer. Well, the thing I think is important to remember is just like this plastic affects each other, it touches, whatever it touches, it's going to have an impact on. I guess it does our skin and the pores of our skin as well. So while I guess here's my tip. Here's my report for this week on the soft plastics that I want you to be aware of. Number one, don't mix them together. If you can keep them in the same package they came in. And that's not just the Z-Man, that's Elastec type of, that I tell you stretches and so forth, but eats other plastics. But even the same kind of plastics together sometimes can have adverse reactions with each other. So number one, keep them if you can in their original package that you buy them in the store. Number two, don't keep them on the hook and rigged up, because if you do that over time, it really is going to affect them. And here's another thing that I was doing. When I go wading, I will put, to try to keep it to a minimum, because I may wade a couple miles, and I want as least amount of bulk on me as I possibly can have. So what I'll do is I'll take those soft plastic baits that I think are going to work for me, the ones that look like a crayfish, the ones that look like a hellgrammite or whatever, and I'll put them in a little plastic like sandwich bag or something and close the top and put that in my pocket. Well, what I find happens with all those baits in there together, they tend to change the shape of each other. In other words, no longer does the crayfish look quite like a crayfish. No longer do the little tails on the Bug Z, that's one of my favorite lures, or the baby goat, that's another one of my favorite lures. Part of what makes them the favorite is they look so natural in the water. But now, after being in my sandwich bag, in my pocket, they tend to change their shape because they've been rubbing against each other, sitting against each other, and they become different, and they become, in many cases, not nearly as realistic to the fish. And that's the whole reason you buy them, because they look like something the fish would eat. So be careful of how you use these soft plastics. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meisner with the North Country Fishing Report.